There is nothing quite like shifting gears in a sports car. Listening to the rev scream as you downshift into a corner, and just experiencing that satisfying thunk of the shifter going from gear to gear. This is automotive bliss. But what if you're not the sorcerer of the stick, or the maniac with the manual? Then you've come to the right place, because in this video, we're gonna go through 8 things that you should never ever do in a manual transmission. And if you're new here, my name is Brad Danger, this is Ideal Media, and hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any other Ideal content. Otherwise, it's great to see you again. Let's go. Now, what's more satisfying than ripping away from the light the second it turns green?
And yep, knew that was coming.
Nothing, right? And the biggest problem is you're probably anticipating the light change. So you got your foot resting on the clutch and your hand on the gear shift, ready for the light to turn green. But did you know that you're wearing out your transmission to do this? Do not, under any circumstances, rest your foot on the clutch pedal or your hand on the shift knob. Because here's the thing, if you leave your foot on the clutch pedal even when you're not shifting, you can cause unnecessary slippage. The dead pedal to the left is there for a reason. The biggest problem is this. You might not even think that you're engaging the clutch if you leave your foot resting on the pedal. But if you don't have your seat perfectly adjusted, chances are you're actually engaging the clutch and your wallet. And another thing I want to tie into that is you should never rest your hand as you're driving on the shift knob. Not only are you not having 2 hands on the wheel, you're likely causing unnecessary wear and tear on the transmission. You see, the gear selector is connected to the rotating collar and the selector fork. And the selector fork is very delicate, just like my feelings. And it's designed to come into contact with the rotating collar for only short increments. So when you put pressure on your gear shift, it will speed up and result in premature selector fork wear. Both of these things are not good for your car, and it will cause parts to wear out prematurely. Okay, let's say that you got a hill to conquer and a manual transmission. Scary, right? Well, did you actually know that you probably will do more damage going down the hill than up? So what do you do when you crest the top? Just throw it into neutral? Nope. So it used to be common when you were going down a hill to throw your car into neutral and just coast. And some people would do that to save fuel, but it actually wasn't saving you any money at all, especially if you drive a modern car. Because with modern fuel systems, coasting actually gives no benefit to efficiency. Also, when you take your car out of gear and you put it into neutral, you actually don't have full control over your car. And that's because you can't accelerate out of sticky situations. You don't go anywhere. And you also lose engine braking, or as they say, compression braking. And so now you're only relying on your brakes. And that increases the risk of brake fade. So there really is no reason that you should put your car in neutral while you're going down a hill. And that brings us to probably the worst thing that you can possibly ever do in a manual transmission. So just don't do it. And that's what we like to call a money shift. Cha-ching! Essentially, what a money shift is you're going along in an RPM and you accidentally miss the gear. So, for example, you go from 6th gear and you're trying to go into 4th and you accidentally go into 2nd. The engine revs to the moon and your engine implodes. And a nice way to say that is you are definitely screwed, and you're probably gonna have to take out a loan on that baby, because it's gonna cost a lot of money to replace that motor, because you're gonna need a full new rebuild. And while we're on the topic of money shifts, we should also cover the next thing that you shouldn't do, which is a power shift. And that's essentially where you don't lift your foot off the accelerator as you shift from one gear into the next. Yes, it's gonna save you 1/10 of a second or less. It's gonna wear out your whole drivetrain so much quicker that it is totally not worth it. And it's a huge mistake that I've actually seen some beginners do. So if you care about your transmission, do not power shift. Let off the accelerator in between each shift, whether you're upshifting or downshifting. And another thing I think that we can all agree on is we don't wanna wear out our clutches early, do we? But I bet that if you've ever driven a stick, heck, I'm guilty of this. You've done this and you shouldn't. And that is leave your car in gear at a light. Admit it. You, me, and pretty much the whole world has done this, and it's actually a no-no, and here's why. What you want to do when you come up to a stop sign is you want to put the car in neutral and then let off the clutch. And yes, I bet that we've all done this once or thrice, but that doesn't mean it's okay. Not only does it wear out your leg muscles, which mine tends to cramp pretty often, which I don't know why, it's also not good for your car. But why? Because it puts unnecessary strain on your clutch and your throwout bearing. And even though your throwout bearing is supposed to outlast your clutch, it's still not good. Because the thing is that when your clutch is depressed, the throwout bearing is in contact with the diaphragm spring. And just that contact can cause premature wear. I think we're starting to see a theme here. And the next thing is just never downshift at high RPM. We talked about the money shift earlier, where you go from 6th gear and you accidentally go into 2nd when you're trying to go into 4th. But let's say you're at 5, 6, 7,000 RPM. Even if you're not at the rev limiter, but you're close, do not downshift. That means do not go from 3rd to 2nd or 4th to 3rd or 6th to 5th. Anytime the engine goes into the red, that is not good. Trust me, your bank account will be crying, and you probably will be too. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you downshifted when you shouldn't, turn off the car immediately. And a lot of people ask me, how do I know if I downshifted when I shouldn't have? Well, you'll know. There'll be a big jerk and you'll hear the engine go ring, and it'll sound like it's revving to the moon. And you're gonna quickly lose a bunch of power and probably fry a bunch of your transmission parts. And conversely, if you're at low RPMs and you still have a long ways to get to redline, don't upshift. That's the meat of the power band, and that's where you should let the car gradually increase. And if it's at low RPMs and then you upshift, you're gonna bog the car even more. So for all you rookies out there, know that the power band's between 2 and 5,000 RPM, and make sure that you use the clutch when you're shifting, because it's your friend. And I know it sounds obvious, but to some of you, especially beginners, you see that third pedal and you get a little bit confused. But when there's a gas, brake, and a clutch, use it. When you go to change a gear, you need to disengage the engine and transmission. Yeah, it is pretty straightforward, but it can be easily overlooked. And it really is one of the most critical parts of driving a manual transmission. And if you want to help save the manual transmissions, go check out this limited edition Save the Manuals tee. It's our best seller, and we're running low on supplies. And remember earlier we were talking about a hill, and once you crest it, don't put your car in neutral? Well, the next thing that you should never do in a manual is use your clutch to hold your car on a hill. Here I am on a hill, and I can either put the clutch in and use the brake, or I can, to hold myself here, use a little bit of clutch and feather it back and forth. Which one do you think I should use? The brake. Push in the clutch, put the car back into neutral, and then take your foot off of the clutch. I know this is gonna take some getting used to for people that are brand new at driving a stick, but this is the best advice that you can get. Do not try to feather that clutch with the throttle to hold yourself on a hill. That's just wearing out that clutch plate because it's grinding over and over and it's not engaging fully. Now I get it. Driving a manual on a hill is pretty intimidating. And luckily a lot of new cars will hold the car there once you release off the brake for a couple seconds before it starts to roll backwards. That is awesome, but a lot of cars are actually dinosaurs. Like this one, that's not even really that old. And since it doesn't have any fancy gizmos, the trick lies here. The parking brake. You engage this, you let go off of the brake, and your car is going to stay exactly where you need it to be. Then you can take your foot off of the brake without rolling, engage the clutch, put the car in first gear, and start it like you normally would. And as you feather that clutch, that is where you're here, and then you slowly let out the handbrake. Clear as mud? I thought so. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get it, actually it's a lot of fun to start on hills. And one of the things that I see beginners do all of the time is they floor it at low RPM. Like we talked about earlier, there's a power band, which general rule of thumb, it's between 2 and 5,000 RPM for most cars. And yet most beginners are too scared to downshift, which takes a little bit of getting used to, because if you're at 2,000 RPM in 4th gear, you then are probably gonna be at 3,000 RPM in 3rd gear. So you do have to get used to blipping the throttle as you shift and use the clutch. That's something to practice in a parking lot somewhere. Because the absolute worst thing you can do is floor the engine at low RPMs. It adds a ton of stress to the engine and may cause it to overheat. And so that added stress can be avoided by just downshifting. And although you might struggle at first, practice makes perfect. So you guys, those are the mistakes that I see happen all the time, and you should never do them while driving a manual transmission. Being able to drive a stick though is one of the most rewarding things that you can do in your automotive career. And even if you're not a true blue enthusiast, it still is really good to know how to do. So the 8 things that I just covered, I better not catch any of you guys doing any of them, because if you do, I don't know if me or the clutch will forgive you first, or unforgive you, I guess. And if you know how to drive a stick shift, let us know down in the comments what things you've seen and what tips or tricks you've found will help get you driving a manual transmission as quickly as possible. And if you enjoyed this video, my name is Brad Danger. This is Ideal Media. We have a ton of great content coming to you almost every single day. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and if you enjoyed the vid, hit the like button. And if you disliked it, don't just hit the dislike button once, hit it twice. Really let us know you hate it. And as always, keep living the ideal lifestyle.